Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. What I was been thinking about was, we've brought it up before, but the things we don't notice, the effects of trauma, that if we don't address trauma, that come back and haunt us. All the things about trauma that if you don't address them, how they show up in your life, and you're not even aware that it's from the trauma, because it's kind of everyday things, but they affect you in your life, and they affect all the people you know, all the people they affect your life in a way that you're not obviously aware of. But if you don't resolve these issues you have with trauma, they keep happening and they keep getting worse and worse in your life because it's all unresolved. And some of them are just, they're not even what you would expect because it affects so much of our lives. And it's not just our mental health, but it's our physical health. It affects our sleeping. It affects how we take care of ourselves. It affects, if you've heard of that ACE test, which we've both done, and I think we both aced it pretty well. Not in a good way. I think I got 7 or 8, and I don't know how many you got, but 10. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things they did that test was to see lifespans and the health of people who have had trauma, comparing it to the people that haven't had trauma and how trauma affects your health. And it has long-lasting consequences to your health if you don't address these issues.
You talked about IFS, internal family systems, and the founder of that method, what happened was he would get people in that were in so much pain physically.
Yeah.
Backaches, things that nobody could fix. And when they would get in touch with the inner child, the inner thing going on, the, inner critic versus the, all the things, all the voices in our head that make us feel schizophrenic, when they would be able to get in touch with them and hear them, because all these voices are our protectors. But when they would honor them and help them change their role, from I'm going to protect you at all costs and make us behave badly, the pain would go away. And so he wrote a book on how to get rid of back pain. But really, he's a family therapist who's developed this thing. And I've always believed that when we hold our trauma in, it's going to come out. And often we see in women, they have bladder issues because if they were sexually abused, then they tend to hold it. They don't want anyone to know they have to pee. It feels like boundary issues. And so then later in life, they end up with all these other things. And so I'm glad that we're talking about this because I feel like I know so many people who have ailments that are real. I'm not saying it's all in their head. They really have pain, but the doctor can't figure it out. And even fibromyalgia, often if a patient has fibromyalgia and they push the doctor, they say, well, we give you the name fibromyalgia when we just don't know what it is, but we see that your immune system.
You have this health problem that we can't figure out where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And that really struck me because it was in the paper, actually. There was an article about it and talking about how trauma, when it's unresolved, when it isn't addressed, how all these other issues, it's not just your emotional effects and the effects of having triggers or the PTSD, but often It's the physical effects that they don't know how to address because no matter what they try, they still linger. You still have insomnia. You still have backaches. You still have stomach issues. You still have urinary issues. All these things, the fibromyalgia that, and people that can never lose weight, that no matter what they try, all these issues, health issues that we don't recognize necessarily as trauma caused, but when you don't address your trauma, your body, still carries that trauma in it and still reacts.
And it can come out physically, but it can also come out, which I see with a lot of clients I've worked with, is control, where they
Mm-hmm.
feel so out of control. They're trying to control everything, which can look like perfectionism or a house that's so clean that you can't live in it. Or, it's like they feel like their world's out of control and they know what they can control. And then they're exhausted from trying to do this because it's not their outside world that's out of control, it's their inside world.
Inside world, yeah, and they become super hyper independent. They don't want any help, and that often makes it hard for them to get to therapy, to get to the help
And
they
it
need.
Yeah, and like you said in the very beginning, it makes it hard on the people around them because when we don't deal with our issues, we suffer, but also people around us suffer. So if we're living with someone who has control issues, we will never be able to help them correctly. They'll always be disappointed.
Hmm.
Like they try to do the thing, but no, because we have to have it a certain way. And so we're miserable. The people around us are really trying to please us, but they're struggling. And then it can come out in our children. For instance, I can address the mom issues. A mom who's not happy with herself, and every time she's in the bathroom, she's like, "Oh, I'm so ugly," or "Oh, I'm too fat." Well, little daughter hears that and picks it up and runs
Hmm.
with it.
Yeah,
And now
and
we've passed it on, our self loathing.
yeah, which then affects them, even though they don't have the trauma necessarily. They're being
Mhm.
affected by our trauma because of.
Secondhand trauma.
Yeah, and I wanted to emphasize this because I think it's so important to recognize that maybe we feel like we're in a good place. Maybe we feel like we've dealt with things because we're handling our life well. We feel like we're in control, but there's all these issues that are lingering and we don't address them. And because of that, maybe when things happen, we lose control so easily. We just lose it and no one knows why. We're just out of control all of a sudden. And we don't have a way of understanding why we're losing it. And so it becomes a bigger situation than it would normally be. I think that's one of the things that tells us that we do have issues is when little things trigger big
Yeah.
reactions.
Right.
And
The bigger than should be for that situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so even though normally we think we have everything under control, when any little thing that wouldn't normally set off such a reaction just blows up, then maybe there's unresolved stuff there that we should be looking at, that we should be addressing. And especially if you have kind of chronic health things that you just feel like you can never get under control, no matter what you try. And I think New Year's is a good time to kind of look at this because this is the time when everyone says, this is the year I'm going to do this. And we have all these resolutions. This is the year I'm going to get exercise. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to get control over my life. I'm going to lose weight. All these things we say we're going to do, and we try so hard for a couple weeks or even a couple months, and then we just give up or we just start taking it easier because we feel like it's just too much work. And
One of
then,
the things I heard them say in that interview with the IFS is we make too big of goals so that we won't have to. See,
mm-hmm.
it's too much. And so I have a real problem with New Year's resolutions because they rarely work. In fact, I saw a statistic that said 56% of people's New Year's resolutions they never follow through. But I think it's way more than that because we set this big goal because we think we're going to do this
Mm-hmm.
total life makeover. And if we just look at one thing, like what is the one thing? So for me this year, I want to love better. I don't want to be offended. Like one year I took on not being offended, but I want to love better and recognize if somebody's maybe not treating me right, it may not have anything to do with me. It may be their trauma. And so that I can look at it and still be myself, be who I am, decide if I want to be in relationship with that or not. Because it's a little different than someone who's just abusive with you,
Mm.
like somebody that can't take a compliment. Like I think we all know someone like that.
Yeah.
And so then what happens? We quit complimenting them.
Hmm.
But I want to keep being true to myself. And if I see somebody doing something, I'm going to compliment them. And if they can't receive it, then rather than say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm still going to do what I do. And I'm an encourager. I'm going to keep doing that. Now, if somebody's volatile about it, I may step out of a relationship. But it's like, what is one thing I can work on and put some real elbow grease into it and that it will actually help me grow versus I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Like we're setting
Hmm.
ourselves up to fail
Yeah.
on that level.
Yeah. And I think that's actually also a symptom of having unresolved issues is setting ourselves up to fail because,
Sabotage.
yeah, we self-sabotage. And so we know we're going to fail, so we expect it because that's just always what happened. And then we have another reason to beat ourselves up and tell us we'll never get any better and just
Right.
kind of resign to that.
Right. And
But
that's the voice. That is the critic
mhm,
voice. So, whatever the voice is that's saying, trying to silence us or telling us we're not enough, that's the voice we want to invite in to listen to make friends with. Because as long as we're trying to push it away, it's got to scream louder because we weren't heard as children. So, it feels it's not heard. So, instead of helping us, it gets louder and louder. But if we can start to recognize those, and there are activities you could do for IFS, but it really is good to get a therapist to walk you through it.
yeah.
And then you get the tools, having walked through it with a therapist, that you can continue to use even when you're not with a therapist.
Hmm.
But that, honoring that part of us that's really still trying to protect us, even though we don't need it anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. No,
And
that's just its role.
yeah. And for me, I have that. You you can't say anything right. And what's my career? What do I do for a career? I speak.
Broadcasting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so isn't that clever and interesting? It's like the voice is saying you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to say something that's going to make your caretakers mad. You need to shut up. And yet here I've spent my whole life trying to talk. And now I'm recognizing, oh, that voice is trying to protect me. It's not trying to shame me. It's trying
Mm-hmm.
to say, because it's all it knows. And so if I can say, what is it you want me to know? What is it that you're trying to tell me? And it feels like really kind of like you're talking to all these different voices, but
Yeah.
I think everyone, whenever you take a writing course, they'll tell you about the voices in your head. Whenever
Yeah.
you take a coaching course, they'll say the gremlin and the angel,
Yeah.
we have all these inner critics, we have these voices. It feels like we're always trying to push them away and say, get out of here. I'm going to do this. But if we could say, hey, I hear you. You're
Hmm.
trying to warn me. And I feel like that's the hypervigilance that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And so it's keeping me in hypervigilance. But then when I go, oh, you're worried I might tell the secret. It's not just, this voice isn't just saying, shut up. And what I'm hearing, don't talk, don't be you. It's saying, it's warning me from telling my secret.
Mm.
Well, that's not relevant anymore, but it doesn't know it. It
Yeah.
hasn't figured it out until I embrace it, so to speak, rather than keep, shoving it away like a ping pong ball. I guess it's
Yeah.
going to keep coming back.
And when we do recognize it, and then you recognize what its role is and recognize what it's trying to do and ask it, is this, is there another way we could do this? Is there give it another role?
Yeah,
Don't just
exactly.
try and shut it up,
Mhm.
but give it another role, a role that serves you better. And for me, when I first read about IFS and first started reading about it, it reminded me of when we talked about the inner child, the child we abandoned, the child that was left behind, the child we never wanted to talk to anymore. And yet, when you do embrace that child and give it a safe place and allow it to recognize that it does have a role, but it doesn't have to worry about, its concerns, you can take care of it and you can let it have another role, a role that's not
More productive.
yeah, it's not just telling you you can't do this, you'll never be good at this, all those things.
Right.
Instead, this is, you can be the cheerleader for that voice.
Yeah. And often, if you are sitting with it, embracing it, if you ask it how old we are,
Hmm.
it's the age of your abuse.
There's
And it's
and
usually a child's age, and that's part of the inner child. And so, from whatever 8 years old on, it's screaming to try to protect you, and we're just shutting it out. And I love that because what we've often said, what we resist persists. So
hmm
we're resisting these things thinking it's healthy because we're trying to be an adult, but really it's harmful because we're not, and often like we've talked about this where people are like, I'm fine, it was in the past. That's another form of shutting it out, saying it doesn't
yeah,
matter. But when we say, okay, it matters, I'm listening, what do you know? And, sometimes we don't, that's where we don't know. Like that's where the repressed memories are. And
hmm
so it might begin to tell us some things. And then it's a process
yeah,
of learning and acknowledging, oh, that's why
acknowledging.
you're freaking out.
Hmm. Yeah, but I think what I wanted to bring up is just a lot of people think they don't need help. A
Yeah.
lot of men don't want to admit that they need help, that they deserve help, a lot of them, because to admit needing help means you're failed at something, that you're not good at something. But we push through and then we get to a place where we have our successful jobs, we're married, have kids, we're taking care of things, we feel like on the outside we look great, we're handling things, but what's going on inside is still eating away at us. And whether it's showing up with our emotional life, or whether it's showing up in our physical life, or both, we can hide it from everyone else, but it's not really easy to hide it all the time,
Well, and I think
everywhere.
I think the flaw in that is that I think it's the illusion that we think we're hiding it from other people, but we have these behaviors that are leaking out. And
Hmm.
the ego says, I've got to look good. I've got to have it together. And that's a lie. That's just a terrible lie that we don't realize we can be vulnerable. We can ask for help and we
Yeah.
can physically feel better, emotionally and mentally feel better.
Yeah. And I think for survivors, especially a lot of men, they don't want to let go of control. So they try to control everything. So asking for help is a way of letting go of control in a way. And so we're not willing to ask for help or recognize that we need help. But what happens is it starts showing up, and then by the time we actually get help, it's because mentally or physically or both, we're breaking down.
Yeah.
Something's just tearing us up, and we can't not face it anymore. We have to face it because our bodies or our minds or
Hmm.
both we end up in the hospital, or
Hmm.
we end up,
Yeah.
because we just push it down and it shows up.
And I think there's something to the word need. I remember when people said, you need antidepressants or you need to see a counselor. There's just something in that message that I want to fight against. But if
Hmm.
I get to the place where I want it, where I say, I want help, I want counseling, I want to feel better, then we're not going to fight it, because often we will go. It's almost like when people are court assigned to go to counseling or AA.
Hmm.
What do? They go, but they don't get anything out of it. So if everybody is saying you need, we may do it, but we still, that word need, it's a shaming kind of thing. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
okay, but you need help. That's how I've always felt it. So when I got to the point where I wanted some relief, I wanted help, and I didn't see it as so much as I need it, but that, wow, I want it and it can make my kids' life better, my family life better, then it was a whole different ballgame, and I was more willing. I was more all in than, we often hear people go to counseling. They go, we've heard it on this show. Oh, it didn't help. Well, why? Because
Yeah.
they feel like they need it. They're going to make everybody happy, but they don't need it. And needing it feels like a weakness. And I think that's a lot of the man thing. It's an ego thing. And so it kind of mutes the whole process.
Yeah, unless we really want to face things and have a change in our life.
Mhm.
And sometimes it happens when everything starts falling apart, then
Yeah.
we want finally want help because we
Hmm.
can't do it on our own,
Yeah.
even though we thought we were doing it
Hmm.
on our
Yeah. Well, and I know like we might be afraid if we get vulnerable. If, like for me, I have a public career. Will I lose my career? People that I know, a counselor that, she was a family counselor going through a divorce. She's like, oh my goodness, I'll lose my career. Like it's so
own.
easy to look at what we think we might lose when actually it may strengthen what we're already doing.
Yeah. So I think for me, recognizing that not paying attention to the ways that trauma shows up in our lives.
Yeah.
For me, I think trauma still shows up in my life. It's not as severe or as frequent as it used to, but I still recognize it.
Mhm.
I still recognize when I see things that others are doing that I used to do. And I go, man, I'm so glad I'm not doing that anymore. But I also remember when I was doing that and why I was doing that and think, why didn't I see? And it's just the unresolved trauma will just haunt you. So it takes that step of deciding you want to do something about the trauma that happened to you and not feeling like that's a failure or a weakness, but feeling like that's going to make you a better person. And I think
Mhm.
that's where it changes because at first you're afraid of doing it because you feel like it's going to label you and you're going to be labeled a failure or weak or helpless because you're trying to get address this. And when in reality, it takes a great deal of courage and
Mhm.
bravery, and to be vulnerable is one of the scariest things there is, but it's one of the most important things you can do.
And there might be along with that feeling of, I tried this and it didn't work. And, we've talked about there's a lot of different types of therapy. And my strong recommendation would be try again. Try
Mm-hmm.
again. And maybe you've made a phone call. Remember last year when I was trying to get into
Mm-hmm.
counseling and all those crazy things happened? It's
Yeah.
like, it's really easy to throw up our hands, but being persistent and being willing, and it takes believing. Like we might go, well, it's not going to help. How many times have we heard men say counseling doesn't work? Their wives are trying to get them to go in and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, it's not going to help. And so believing, what if there is an option? What if there is help for what I'm going through? What if there is a solution for me to feel better? Like, am I willing
Yeah.
to do whatever it takes to find that for the sake of my family, my friends, the people who love me, whose life I may be making harder without me even realizing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people are willing to go to therapy just to prove that it isn't working or it won't work. So they'll go with the
Yeah,
whole intent of not
right.
getting better because they want to prove that they
Yeah,
don't need therapy.
exactly.
And it works. You can definitely prove that it didn't work because you're too
Yeah,
stubborn to try and make a change. But that's again, people telling you you need to do this, and you're going, I don't need to because I don't want to.
right. That's why stories are so important, because one story is going to resonate with one person where they're going to go, it worked for her. Because I've heard a lot of stories of people who got help, but they weren't at there wasn't the type or whatever of abuse that I've gone through. The stories that I gravitate to are the ones where people with the kind of trauma I had were able to get help. And I'm like, because I've been there. I've thought nothing is going to work for me. I feel like sometimes I keep cycling back, even though it's different every time. And I'm at a different level. You and I have talked about this so many
Yeah,
times where we feel
yeah,
like we're back to square one. We're really not, but it
no,
feels that way because we've got so much more behind us. But it's choosing to believe, yes, there's help, and we see this person did it. So maybe
yeah.
I can get there too. So telling
And
your story is so important.
well, and choosing to be vulnerable is where it comes from because until you're ready to do that, you're not going to take the steps to go back to those places that are scary.
Mhm.
You go back to those different modes, those different, the different controllers or supporters, all those different parts of us that are trying to control us, but
Mm-hmm.
it's because they were hurt, or they're afraid, or they're trying to lead us away from certain things. But I recognize that they're really good at convincing us not to pay attention to them sometimes. I mean, they're yelling in our head, but they're also trying not to be recognized, because if we recognize them, then we might start approaching them, and they want to just do their work in the background. It's kind of esoteric when you get into it, the IFS and the different. But what I like about it is you approach it, like you said, a little bit at a time. You don't just try and tackle huge tasks or try and take on everything at once. You just want to address the things that are
Mm-hmm.
affecting you maybe right now, and then you could look at the things that affect you in the long run, and you could look at the things that affect you certain times. But just generally you start with what's affecting you in the immediate, what is really getting to you lately, and
Yeah.
then you start there. But I really feel that if people recognized how much effect unresolved trauma had in their lives and realized that it affects everyone, and it affects your health, it
Mm-hmm.
affects your sleeping, it affects your heart, your back, all kinds of things that
Mm-hmm.
happen to us because we're holding in this trauma.
And not only are we holding it, but like we said, they're saying my backache, my pain. So they're holding it and they're owning it.
Hmm.
And it's trauma that can be released and let go, but there's some ownership going on. And I think that's where, it's hard to recognize that and even we've talked, we haven't talked with, but Jim Clemente, when he talks, when he interviews people on the crime podcast, they'll say, my abuser, and he'll stop and say, hey, I just want you to know, if you're going to call that person your abuser, you're giving them so much power. Can we just
Mm.
say the person who abused me? And I love it that
Yes.
people are pointing that out, because that's how we begin to release.
Yeah. I know for me, I had many physical symptoms from trauma.
Mm.
I had insomnia most of my life, and along with insomnia, I had cluster headaches that they were traumatic in themselves as far as the effect they had on my life. And I had night terrors, and so much of that was just because I had so much bottled up inside of me. And now when I've recognized people that are struggling with these physical symptoms, with insomnia or headaches, and I feel like I wish I could help them get to that place of not just focusing on the symptoms, because that's what I did at the time. I focused on the insomnia, tried to do all these things to fix my insomnia. And along with
Mhm.
that, the cluster headaches caused a lot of the insomnia, and so did the night terrors. And so I tried all these medicines, all these ways of dealing with the symptoms, but I wasn't addressing why I was having all these symptoms. And so I think if people, instead of just focusing on what is happening to them and focusing on how they fix that, the symptoms,
Mhm.
if they look at maybe if I can work on my other issues, maybe there's these other things that I've been hiding from.
Mhm.
Maybe if I try to just work on that a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, and being open to that there might be something. You may know, you may not know, you may have just said that's in the past, but being open to the fact that childhood trauma affects us our whole life
Yeah,
unless we start dealing with it. And even when we do deal with it, it's those layers and we get better and better. But being open to seeing if there is something, if you're
yeah,
really struggling with an illness. And we're not saying it's in your head. Like, that's the most
no,
offensive thing when people be like, well, you manifested this. It's like, no, our body creates it. And one of the things for me that I didn't realize this until later when I look back, I always went way over time with my babies. And I think there was part of me that didn't want to bring them in because I couldn't protect them. I didn't, in my heart, I don't think I had the words for it, but I didn't think I could protect them. And so, my kids were always way overdue. And,
Funny.
I think that, of course, back in that day, we didn't know what we know now, but
Mhm.
that's a symptom too, is we might be, you
Holding
might be like,
on.
I just want to have this baby, but your body may be going, oh no, because you're still in relationship with that person who abused you and you don't even know it. Let's be open to looking at things when there's no medical understanding of what's going on. It might be way deeper that our bodies created this to protect us.
Yeah, I had so many health problems and really never caught the connection. I never
Yeah.
even looked at them as connected. I never even thought they were connected. And yet I started dealing with my issues and then realized things were getting better physically for me.
Yeah.
And even then, I didn't quite get the connection until most of those physical ailments went away. They are still lingering in my life. And I go, oh, that's because I don't have that trauma hanging over me. I understand my trauma. I know how to handle my trauma. I've dealt with a lot of my trauma. And now all of a sudden, it's like I don't need all these other meds and all these other things to deal with
Mhm.
my insomnia and my night terrors and my
Mhm.
cluster headaches. It's like, dang, why didn't I deal with this 20 years earlier? I would have
Mhm.
lived so much healthier. I wouldn't have
Yeah,
had
but
to
we don't
need.
know what we don't know. And that's why this podcast feels so important. It's because we can make a suggestion and say, hey, maybe this is what's going on. We can share stories where someone will go, oh, that happened to me. And oh, by the way, it mattered. Not,
Hmm.
it didn't matter and be quiet.
Yeah,
It mattered. And we say, tell your story. Sometimes it's not safe, and that's okay. Find the safe place. But it's like, it's when it's locked up in us,
yeah.
it has nowhere to go except into our joints and our organs and our.
Yeah, well, I think don't hide it. So if that means being able to tell it to someone, that's one way. If that means getting a therapist, that's a really good way. If that means writing it in a journal, even if you have to
Mhm.
throw it away or tear it up
Burn it.
afterwards or
Yeah.
burn it, that's another way. If it means going to the male survivor website and putting your story out there, but don't hide it, don't hide from it. I
Mhm.
think for a lot of survivors, if you recognize you have a lot of physical and other symptoms that you just can't seem to find any kind of help with, nothing
Mhm.
seems to work. Maybe there's more stuff you're bottling up inside that you want to look at.
Yeah, right? Well, remember
There's stuff
we.
inside that
Yeah.
would help you if you took care of looking
Yeah.
at or took care of it.
Remember when Nathan, I just love his story because he was just living this drastic lifestyle
Oh,
and
yeah.
he had lost everyone around him. He didn't know why. And somebody who loved him deeply said, I think it's time to share your truth, and made it safe for him. And then he wanted to. But up until that point, his mind was like, I will never, ever tell
Hmm.
anyone. But however she approached him, she made it safe for him and said, you're losing everything. And I'm
Yeah.
the last person you've got here, and I care about you. And there's obviously something deeper going on, which gave him the courage and he told her the story. And it opened all these doors for him to get the help and get the in groups and
Yeah.
do what would help him. But it wasn't a you need to. It was like, just tell me what is going on. Why are you sabotaging? Why are you living this crazy life? And again, it's sometimes you said we get to the end of our rope where we go, I can't even help myself. And that's so AA, is like there's a power higher than us. And when we surrender and say, I cannot
Yeah.
do this on my own, and then we invite community in to help us recover, because we cannot recover in a vacuum.
Yeah. I don't think anyone can really recover from trauma by themselves, just working it out themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't, it just
But we
doesn't
had to
work.
do it as a child, so we
Uh-huh.
think that's the only way.
Yeah.
Good news. We don't
Yeah.
have to.
Well, and that's the important thing is you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to be alone in this. People do want to help you. There are people out there that want to help you and want to be
And can
there
hear
for
your
you.
story. Like
Yeah.
we sometimes we think people couldn't possibly hear our story and survive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there are people that aren't going to shame you for your story.
Hmm.
They're not going to make you feel guilty about your story. They're going to accept you for who you are and not for what you've been through.
Right.
And when you find those people, what happens is once you start telling your story and getting help and addressing, then you're able to help others as well. But the
Hmm.
most important thing is when you start healing from this, all your other relationships start to change and they start to get better. And you stop having these other, I mean, it's not just the physical things, the emotional things are really important. A lot of the emotional effects, the hidden emotional effects of trauma,
Hmm.
are just sabotaging all your relationships.
Yeah. Well, there's something that your wife always says, and I love it. Pay attention. Pay attention when we start to recognize these and we pay attention because awareness is first, that we become aware, and then that we pay attention, and then maybe we do some work around it. But the first
Yeah.
thing is really awareness and recognizing, wow, maybe there is something here.
Yeah. Why is it I have all these symptoms? Or why is it
Hmm.
my relationships? Or why is it I always blow up when this
Hmm.
happens? Or why
And
is it?
that saying too, like the common denominator, it's like everybody's treating me badly. It's like, let's look at that because maybe there's something, and it's hard to admit that we've already been the victim. We've already had all these things happen. And now you're trying to tell me that I'm treating people badly. But even it's even a aura, like when not accepting a compliment, when we push
Hmm.
people away and we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And we do it in so many different ways.
well, this has been such a great topic, and I love
Yeah.
talking about it because it's so important, and
Yeah.
just knowing that there's help and support, and we don't have to do this alone anymore is just so huge.
Yeah, well, I think we both know people who, if they got help, that would change their lives so much, but they want to do it themselves. They want to be in control. And so they don't let down and ask for help. And we know how much things could change for them. And I think, yeah, New Year's resolutions is what kind of got me on this is all these people want to fix these things in their lives, but they're just fixing the symptoms. They're just fixing the things that would make them look better. And they just want to look better. So they want to fix these things, but they don't want to work on themselves. No, they just want to fix these things to make them look better.
Let's go deep. Let's go
Yeah,
deeper.
yeah. Pay attention.
Well, this is a good time for us to close, and we always like to close in prayer. If that's not for you, you can dump out now. But if you'd like to stick around, we love to pray with you.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, especially that you do want us to pay attention. You do want us to find those things in our lives that where we were hurt, where we are afraid to look.
Mhm.
You want us to find those things and turn them over to you
Mhm.
and get help for them. Get the help that we deserve for those things. And Lord, I just pray that you would be that spark in someone's life when they just resolve to fix their things this time of year, when they're thinking, okay, if I just did this, maybe be the spark in their lives that says, there's also this. You always ignore this, but this is something that you can work on that would help you and everyone in your life would be better off if you were working on this. Don't just look at that, but look at this and give them the permission to be afraid, but also give them the bravery to try and to do it. Lord, I just pray for courage for anyone listening to resolve not just to fix the symptoms, but to look deeper and want to work on those hidden issues that we've been hiding from everyone. Have the courage to work on that and see if you can change some ways we feel about ourselves in our lives. Lord, I just pray for your grace and mercy while they're doing that, so they they would feel supported by you. In your name I pray.
Lord, we thank you that you are a good God and that you want healing. And I think of the verse that says, "Search me, O God, and know
Mm.
my ways, see if there be any wicked way in me." And although wicked seems like a strong word, often when we have these childhood wounds, we are hurting people because we're not allowing people to love us or help us. And we're isolating ourselves and we're trying to do it all on our own. And Lord, that is not how you created us. You created us for community, for love, and to be not only loved, but to accept love. And that's how we love others. And often we think we're loving people well when we're not, because we won't allow them in. And if we could just pay attention, and Lord, maybe there's a hurt that we know about and we've always brushed it off, that we could just look at it and acknowledge it and do some work around it, that we might begin to experience some freedom. And, back in the day, we were told to be quiet, keep the secret, and there were consequences, but help us to realize we're adults now and it's okay. It's okay to share our secret. And if it's not, if we're still in those abusive relationships, that there are safe places to go, that there are places to share our truth, and that it is the thing that is going to begin to bring us some freedom. Thank you that you love us and you want healing for us. You want good health for us. You want us to be able to deal with the root cause that will help us to really heal and thus love others and allow you to love us as well as others. In your son's name, amen.
Amen.